share with you in this session, all of the details around what's going to be in that release. You can see all the different features that are there. There's three of the features. We're going to come back on after lunch and we'll go into more detail. We'll show you actual demonstrations of those features on an early build. Ignition 8.3 is going to be coming out in beta in December. So I'll talk more about the release timeline at the end here. But hopefully you guys get a good sense of what's going to be in 8.3. And of course, if there's any questions, come seek me out. Come find me here today. You can ask me any questions you want, whether it be on the new release or, of course, where we are right now. So we're going to just go through a series of features, and we're going to start with connectivity. So one of the first features we're adding to Ignition 8.3 is a new driver for the Ignition Gateway, the platform, and that is the Siemens S7 Plus driver. So we've got a lot of drivers in Ignition right now, and we have a Siemens S7 driver we have currently, but that only allows us to work with the block addressing. With the S7 Plus, it'll allow us to do symbolic addressing. So that's where a lot of people, when they're developing on Siemens devices, that's what they're using. And people have been using the onboard OPC UA server, but there are inherent performance limitations with using UA directly on the device. So having the S7 Plus driver directly in Ignition will make that a lot simpler process, and it will be included in the platform. So anybody, when you upgrade, you'll get the driver for free. It'll be a part of Ignition. Of course, if anybody that buys a new license, it'll just be part of the platform as all the other drivers that we have in Ignition. So that's the first one. It's a very simple one, but very impactful for a lot of people who are using these devices. They need an easy way to connect and work with it and not have to have a third-party OPC server and to do that directly. And plus, we're seeing Siemens PLCs being chosen in greenfield situations more these days. So that's the first one. The next one, continuing with that kind of connectivity, is to expand our notification system. So right now we have email, we have SMS, and we have voice. Voice is done through VoIP. So you would use some standard VoIP system, whether it's on-premise or you go to a cloud service. And we have had SMS through Twilio, and we're expanding that to use Twilio Voice. So that way you can use voice notification through Twilio services. Along with that, we are able to use WhatsApp. So we'll have direct WhatsApp integration where you can notify and you can send messages to people on their phones using that system, as well as to be able to have acknowledgements or communication back to Ignition from WhatsApp as well. Now, one thing that's really important about Ignition 8.3 is that with our alarming system, our notification system, before it was tied very heavily just to alarms on tags. With some introductions of some new features in 8.3, we'll actually be able to send out notifications directly to all of these systems. So I could have data coming in that I send directly to WhatsApp. I don't have to actually have an alarm configured in Ignition for that to happen. So it'll allow us to have better integration to be able to just use these services, whether you want to send an email out, an SMS, a WhatsApp message, a voice call. All these can be done with the alarming system and, of course, just with Ignition in general. So that's quite nice to be able to have. This will be a good update to Ignition 8.3, since a lot more people want to be able to get the notifications the way they want, especially operators, and they don't want to do the classic email or SMS ones. They would prefer some newer systems. So that is happening there in 8.3. Continuing on with OPC UA, we're doing a number of new updates to that as well. As we said before, it's not a versus with MQTT. They're very complementary. We use OPC UA in Ignition. We have a built-in OPC UA server. We're also a client to third-party OPC servers. So it's really important that we continue to leverage a standard. And there are a lot of updates, a lot of things happening in the OPC UA world, especially around the DCS side with the standard called the OPAS standard, Open Process Automation. And so we're making sure that our OPC UA stack is up to date and allowing you to take advantage of those features. So I'm going to highlight the middle one there, which is the Eclipse Milo. As our OPC UA stack is built on the Eclipse Milo standard. It's an open standard that is the OPC UA implementation for a Java implementation. We actually wrote that implementation early on, and we contributed to the Eclipse Foundation. So now it's a standard. Those teams are managing that. We are updating our version to the latest Eclipse Milo version that supports OPC UA 105. And the reason that is important is because that we can actually do data modeling directly from OPC UA. So if a PLC or a device or a third-party client has a data model or a UDT already built out in there, we don't have to build that in Ignition. Just by connecting to that system, we'll discover it and we'll have those automatically created inside of Ignition. It will also allow us to use the global discovery service that OPC UA has, as well as to use high availability. So that's actually built into the specification. If you have multiple servers, they are basically, I can discover when I connect all the servers that are there. I don't have to specify them in the redundancy settings, and will automatically fail over to the proper server that's there. So it's just direct. It's all part of basically using more of the OPC UA specification now that it's becoming more defined and more products are actually using that. The very top one there, the specific tag sharing, that's a really important one for a lot of customers because they want to get data to third-party systems from Ignition. And right now, with 8.1, it is all or nothing. If that client connects to our OPC UA server, they're going to get all the data that Ignition has. They can subscribe to any kind of tag that's there, whether from the devices directly or from tags that are configured inside of Ignition. With this release, with this update, you'll be able to use roles and permissions and specific settings to only share a subset of that data to different clients. So you can be more selective about what you want to share out there. And especially important if you want to get information to a third party through that standard, you don't have to create a separate server that does that. You can have it specified within that and be more controlling about where that data is going to go. The last piece that I want to mention on OPC UA is that it's also going to tie into a new feature we have called event streams. I will talk more about that here today, but it'll allow us to take the OPC UA events that are happening and to be able to directly put them onto the event stream bus and handle them any way that we want to inside of Ignition, whether that be write to databases, write to tags within Ignition, setting it to MQTT, Kafka, or any other system that's out there. We can tie directly into those OPC UA events and have it be just normal part of Ignition. So this 8.3, there's a kind of common theme of bringing a lot of different features and functions together into a common framework. And we're really excited about being able to do that because it's going to make your life a lot easier in how you want to move data and how you want to get that data out. All right. The next one is really impactful for anybody who's been developing Ignition for quite some time around alarming. You probably run into some frustrations, specifically around being able to see the alarm status for a group of alarms, right? Or potentially for a folder inside of Ignition. If you have your tag tree, I want to be able to see all of the alarms that are active within area A. I have a folder for area A, I have a folder for area B, and that's been a difficult task. There's some Exchange resources, people who have built a UDT that would go and query our alarm status and represent that, in the tag tree, which is a lot of extra work to be able to do that, and you shouldn't have to do that. We should be able to provide that information to you. And there's also performance implications to having thousands of these UDTs that are querying, polling our alarm status engine. So what we're doing in 8.3 is really a simple thing that on a folder within Ignition, on UDT instances and on folders, there will be a metadata that's exposed that allows you to subscribe to alarms that are active within that folder. Now we're going to go further after 8.3. We're going to define more features around alarming to define your own groups of alarms and to have more analysis. But this is going to be really important so that you don't have to worry about performance problems. And it's really simple on screens for like an overview screen where you can just simply bind that to one of these meta tags to give you the alarms for that area or for whatever's inside that folder. And it goes from that folder and below, and every folder will have it. And it'll just be very, very simple for you to use. So again, another small feature, but very impactful, especially for folks who have been having to deal with that in their own way. Okay, so the next one is around launching the Vision client, the Perspective workstation, and the Designer. Right now in Ignition, the way you do that is you would download the launcher, and then you would configure the launcher to go to that Ignition gateway and what project you want to view. And that's fine. It works really well. But for a lot of companies, they just want to make this process simpler. So they have their IT department. They push out the launcher automatically to all the client stations. And then what they can do, if you look at the animation that's here, is they can simply click a link on the home page or on the page that will directly launch that application, the designer, the client, without having to do any configuration in that launcher. So we call it deep link launching. It kind of brings back if you were with us a very long time ago, we used to have this feature called, there was a feature in Java called Web Start that allowed us to launch the application directly from the web page. But it was an application. And we had to get rid of that because WebStart had some security issues. And so this is now kind of a way to be able to bring that back in a way. Now, of course, if you're using Perspective, you don't have to use a launcher. But for people who are using the workstation wrapper, that is a much easier way to launch the workstation, which is what this graphic here is showing. So deep link launching is just going to be easier for people that are new to Ignition. They can get the link, you can send them a link in the browser, and they can click the link and it can just launch the application directly. And it'll create a shortcut if they want it from there on. They don't have to actually configure it, download something, install it, and configure it. It's much, much simpler. But again, if you're using Perspective, this process is already very simple. Just give them a URL, open their browser, and they're good to go. So these are just for the native launchers that we have inside of Ignition. Okay. Next, I want to talk about 8.3. We're always looking at improving our user experience, the UI, the gateway web page that's there. And we are taking a fresh new look at it and really revamping it for 8.3. So for people who are veterans to Ignition, they're familiar with the 3 sections, the home, status, configure sections, that this upgrade is going to be a little bit jarring at first because it's going to be quite different experience. But we feel that the experience is going to be a lot better. So we'll show you some screenshots and some animations of what that UI will look like. So let's start here with just kind of an overview of what that looks like. We want the UI to be very consistent in terms of how you access information within the web page, and we want to have more data at your fingertips. So what's important here, what I want to show is if you look on the left-hand side over here, there are some sections. You have the home section, which is really going to be kind of a dashboard, and you are in control. You can actually customize what widgets go where and what you want to show on the home screen. So that home screen is your first entry into the Ignition server when you put the IP address of the host name in your browser. So you can configure that completely, but then you have sections over here for the platform, and this platform is where you do a lot of platform configuration and things like setting up security, setting up some various auditing settings, various things like that. Then you have below that connections. So one of the big gripes of Ignition is that if I'm connected to all these different systems, databases, REST APIs, devices, MQTT servers, OPC UA servers, you have to go to each of those sections independently to kind of see what we're connected to. And so what we're going to do is actually combine all of that together into one area where you can see, in that one area, you can see all the connections you have within Ignition and get to that data very quickly. And the other thing we're going to do with this release is we're going to combine our configuration section with our status section. So we'll put it together. So what I mean by that is today, if you go in there and you set up a database connection and you connect to your Microsoft SQL Server database, if it is faulted, you have to go to the status page to see why it's faulted. You then say, okay, my password's wrong. I go back to the configuration section. I make that change. It's faulted again because I did something stupid. I go back over here, and you're just kind of this back and forth. And you can have 2 tabs open, yes, but it's kind of annoying to have to do that. We're going to marry those 2 sections together so you don't have to do that anymore. You'll get that status right there. And the details as to why it's faulted, I'll show you. I think they might have one example of that. So we're trying to make the user experience much, much better. The other thing I want to point out is that over here on the left, you have the connections. You also have network. And network will actually show you all the things that Ignition is connected to in a visual way. Like with our gateway network diagram, we're going to expand that diagram to show more connections within Ignition. So, and as well as put diagnostic data all in one place as well. So it's very, very simple to get to. So we're trying to make this UI very easy to use, very intuitive. We've worked with a lot of UI, UX people to kind of define standards for how this web page works. So there's some sections right now are quite different from others in the UI, and all that's going to be standardized, much, much simpler to work with. and I hope more intuitive, plus better searching and better filtering and more performance with this new web UI. So let's show another graphic here. This is going to platform modules, and what this is kind of showing that every kind of table, we're showing a lot of connections. There's the consistent fill of being able to define what columns you want to see, the filtering, be able to get that information, be able to do the configuration right there, and again, a much simpler way. So everywhere we've kind of definitely thought about that experience and how we can improve that experience. I am very excited about this. I've seen, I'm not going to show that today, but I've been able to interact with it, and at first, again, it's different, but once you get used to it, it's much more intuitive. So we're really excited about that fact. I have one more thing to point out later about this, but that comes into the play about the data, but we'll come back to that. All right. So probably the most thing everybody here probably wants the most, our most requested feature of Perspective for a number of years, ever since it was released back in 2020, has been drawing tools. So guess what? We finally have drawing tools. Right. So now if you're ever wondering how to draw a circle, you can certainly do that with Perspective. It's only taken 4 or 5 years to make that happen. So, but we're excited. Perspective Drawing Tools is a complete 2D drawing engine built inside of the designer so that you can create SVGs, modify existing SVGs, and I will show a demo of this today. I'll actually show you the experience and different ways that you can bring in SVGs and how you can modify them, how you can create new ones from scratch. So it is one that people are very excited about because building HMI screens in particular, more and more people are using Perspective for HMIs, and we wanted that to be easier process, right, to build those HMI screens. So we'll show a couple of animations here. This is just showing you the builder. So there's lots of, again, we built it from scratch. Think of like Inkscape inside the designer. There's all sorts of things you can do, different tools, different ways that you can play with it. And you can see, of course, on the right over here, all of the elements. So you can have groupings. You have all the tools to do all different shapes. Makes that really, really easy to work with. So if you right click or double click on these, you can get to the editor where you can start that design experience. The other thing you could do, of course, within this is actually do binding. And this is probably a really important one for if you're trying to animate SVGs. I don't know if a lot of you have seen in doing this in the old way, if I take an SVG and I drag it into Designer, and I am trying to edit that, in the property editor, you see the SVG, all the hierarchy of the SVG, which if you get a more complicated one, it'd be very difficult to find that one line or that one circle or that one piece of it that you want to be able to animate and change and do something to. But of course, if you're in here, you can just click on it directly and then go add the binding on the right-hand side, and it makes it very easy. And that binding you'll be reflected back on the property tree. You will see the actual binding you have, whether it's a tag or an expression or whatever. So very easy to use, very simple, and much more feature-rich than the Vision one that we had, and we're very excited to be able to bring that and have that available in this next release. So yay for drawing tools. The next thing we're doing in Perspective is we're always looking at enhancing Perspective because there is a lot of stuff that we can do. The web world, especially with React, that's what it's built on. There is so much innovation, so many great open source tools that are out there that we can use. And one of the things that a lot of people have been struggling with have been around forms. So it's not a terribly difficult thing to do. If you want to build a form, you just have to bring in all the different elements, labels and text fields and drop-down lists, right? All these things you're putting together, and then you're going to have a submit button where you then have to write the Python code that is going to do validation, right? Make sure that you didn't leave that field empty. And then if it's empty, you want to be able to have that feedback, right? That you want to make it red or show the user in some way that it was wrong. So that experience is just time consuming right now. And we want to make that experience much, much simpler. So what we're doing is we're adding a new component to Perspective that is a form component. So this is what the component looks like. Basically, you define your entire form in a property model. And it will support all sorts of different widgets that you can bring onto that form. It'll have validation built into it. It'll make everything a lot easier in terms of building these things from scratch. You also, once you've built a form, you can kind of copy and paste that, and you can just change up various things. You could, of course, having it be driven by a property model means that we can have dynamic forms. We can have forms that are driven from, database queries that we have, whatever it might be. Building the form, the process for building the form will be a much simpler. I will also, this animation is not the best. I will show in the technical session later this component in action, so you can see what it looks like and how we would submit the data from that form and what the validation looks like. And there's going to be a lot of innovation around this, a lot of features that we'll be adding to it. I'm sure, like the drawing tools, we're going to get tons of feedback on this particular feature. But what's really cool about this feature is that we need it not just to be able to build forms better, but we also, it's a necessity for being able to have forms that work offline, so that we can actually capture data, out in the field when I have no Wi-Fi or no cellular connectivity. So that is we call perspective offline mode. Now, forms is the first feature that's going to take advantage of offline capability within Perspective. We built Perspective to be offline, so forms was a natural feature that we can add to it, but it's much more than that. It's actually making the entire Perspective application offline. So I'll show you what that looks like here with these animations. Basically, on the native app, when you're going and connecting to your system, you bring your project in, you can actually edit it, and you can say, make it available offline. And that will download all of that application onto that native device. So then when I go out in the field and I try to launch the application, it's going to be available for me to launch. Now, keep in mind that there are certain things that will not function, right? If we are trying to have a button that does Python code, it's not going to execute on that device, it executes on the server. If I have bindings to go get data from SQL queries or tags, those aren't going to function, right? But that form component will function. It will allow us to do everything that's in there, and we can submit that data, and that data will be queued on that device. It'll be stored on that device, and when you're back in range, it will then synchronize that data back to the server, so you don't lose any of that form data. You can be completely offline and have that work. For people who have been trying to do this with Ignition, it was possible. They just had to use WebDev and had to build their own forms through HTML. And it was just a very advanced lot of work. So with the combination of these two features, it makes this process a lot simpler. So that's what it looks like here for making a system offline. What you would then do is we're just kind of simulating turning off Wi-Fi. You would then go and connect up to that project. So you can see it will launch, it will run just fine. And screens that have graphics and various things will still function, right? You can still use it, especially if you have maps and all that, it still function. But here's the forms, and we can go in, put our data into the form, and have that be submitted. So we're very excited about being able to do this. Yes. Okay, so I alluded to event streams earlier on with OPC UA, right? Having the OPC UA events being brought into the event stream. So event streams is a brand new feature in 8.3 that I think is going to be a huge game changer. Today, we have all sorts of ways that we bring data into Ignition, from PLCs, OPC servers, MQTT, SQL databases, REST APIs, serial devices, all sorts of ways that we bring stuff in. Now, of course, there's more connectivity options that people want, but there's never been a single framework to handle that data, right? Some of it will come into tags. Some of it we might handle, through configuration of the module, and it's all been fairly prescriptive about how you use that. We want to have a framework where you can literally do whatever you want in terms of being able to move data around or stream data around with an Ignition, and that's what Event Streams is designed to do, as a highly scalable, highly performant way of doing that. So let's kind of talk about the structure of what that looks like. What we will do is you could define in Ignition one or more event streams, and I will demo this afternoon as well. I'll show you what event streams looks like. You define one or more sources of data, and when that comes in, that data will then be filtered, transformed, it could be batched or queued or saved, and then it can be handled by some handler, some system. So there's sources and there's handlers, and that can come from a variety of different places. This is where we're combining all of Ignition together into this event streams. So sources could be tags, Sources and handlers could be tags, could be MQTT, subscribing to a particular topic. It could be databases. It could be data coming from other gateways, other Ignition servers through the gateway network. It could be transaction groups that you want to kick off and run, or SFCs you want to kick off and run. It could be alarms that are generating Ignition that get brought into an event stream. There's all sorts of unique possibilities with this system. And we're also going to be introducing new connectors, so we can expand this as we go forward. As those sources and handlers are part of the SDK, we can expand them, you can expand them, we have partners that can expand them. And so we're really excited about this system growing and giving you more and more options. We specifically are going to be building the Kafka connector. As Kafka is the standard kind of on the business side for moving data around, and a lot of customers are using it. We want to be able to bring data in from Kafka and to send data to a Kafka cluster. So Event Stream is going to be an easy way to do that. I will show you this afternoon the Kafka connector as well, so you can see how we can move data around. So this is a quick example of what that looks like. You can build the event stream itself. When one or more event streams you can define inside of the designer, and you can see the kind of all that configuration that's there, your source, to the filtering transforms, to then handling that data. And this one's actually showing a database handler where we're writing those values to a database. So very excited about this particular feature. It allows also connectivity to other systems, other products can really be brought together by leveraging these open standards. So Kafka, MQTT, Mongo, SQL, OPC UA, all these things are going to be much easier from a stream processing standpoint. The future we will be, which is like 8.3 or 8.3.1, 8.3.2, we'll be adding connectivity to Azure services, AWS services within this, like SNS, SQS, Azure Service Bus. There's all sorts of possibilities of what we can use with this system. Okay, so I think I need to hurry a little bit more. Another thing we're doing 8.3 is we are expanding the historian. We're beefing up the API. It's behind the scenes so that we can provide implementations of our inside of Ignition, along with allowing third party to add implementations. So this is where Canary and Flow can really be brought into the Ignition ecosystem as a first class way of configuring a tag at Ignition to then store to those systems. But within Ignition, we want to replace our internal historian with something much more powerful. And we think that will actually, for a lot of customers, replace locally on-premise even the SQL implementation. And that is called our Power Historian. This is based on open source technology called QuestDB, which is a time series database technology. We'll have in-process embedded inside of Ignition. It's not proprietary. It's based on an open standard. You can externalize QuestDB into its own cluster if you want to. We'll have it built into Ignition, though in process. So for people who are logging locally, especially if they want to keep 6 months, a year, whatever, they can do that effectively, efficiently, and they can synchronize that data up to another source. So today, synchronization to other sources is a little bit difficult. You have to use splitters and all this stuff. We want this to be a very simple path to go from the local historian to whatever remote system you want, database or Canary or Flow or whatever you want that to go. So we're very excited about that. And with our implementation, the performance is ridiculous. This is why I think a lot of people will want to replace my SQL database. It is a really performant, really amazing technology. If you just go query QuestDB, you'll see what I mean. And we're going to provide all that completely for free. So you'll have that in the Tag Historian module. And for anybody who has it, upgrade, you'll get this Power Historian right off the gates. So we're really excited about doing that. All right, the last thing I want to do is the last feature I want to talk about has to do around modern IT infrastructure. And I alluded to earlier as to what I'm excited about. This I am super excited about. There's some amazing technology that we can make first class within perspective around containerization, orchestration, infrastructure as code, source control, and how we want to deploy, how we want to manage Ignition. So first thing we're doing is we're putting all of our configuration in the file system as JSON files that we can store inside of a repository like a Git repository. Makes it very, very simple to be able to do change tracking, to be able to do diffing of your versions, and we're not defining how that's done inside of Ignition. We're not controlling, you're not doing version control our own way. We're using standard off-the-shelf products and technologies that you can use to do that. So by storing our config in the file system that way, it gives you more flexibility. So everything will just be as these JSON files. We are also then adding a REST API to Ignition so that you can access status and configuration through third-party tools. So all that whole web UI I showed you earlier, that is going against this REST API. Everything that's accessible in that web UI will be accessible to a third-party application or even to you in Perspective or a vision system. You can use that API directly. And where we see a lot of companies that want to use this is through tools like Ansible or other IT tools where they want to be able to do management of Ignition, see what's happening, as well as do changes, especially to fleets of Ignition servers. They can send changes out to all of them at once in a controlled way, leveraging the API, and it gives you a lot of flexibility how to do that. Now, we're also beefing up our EAM functionality, so you can, with EAM, the controller, you can synchronize configuration, but we see more companies that want to use external tools. Perfect, go ahead and do that. This API and the JSON configuration help you to do that. The last thing that's really important is we have a lot of companies who have a single production server, and they've been over years making changes to that production server. They would go to the designer and make changes. They save it, it's deployed, no problem. That's great. You can certainly do that. But for some, these systems get so big that they become very critical, and they don't want people or developers going in there and making changes directly on that server, because what if they mess up, add something that is going to cause the server to crash? What if they delete something that wasn't supposed to? So there are some challenges to developing on a production system. People want to be able to have a development system, a testing environment, and then move that to production. So developing that process for what that looks like. Plus, these environments typically are going to be different. The development system will be potentially a simulator for PLCs, different database. And as you move through, these environments might be separate, but you want to have a simple way of moving your data, your config, from each of these environments to that production environment when you are ready, when you've done all your full testing on those features. So we are introducing a new feature called deployment modes that is going to make this, we think, make this process a lot simpler. Because going back here, moving between these environments, you can use EAM, you can use Git flows, you can do all sorts of things. But one thing that we need to do is make the configuration easier for you to define the differences of those environments. And that's what we're doing here with deployment modes. You have the ability to define those different modes. So it's not just dev, test, prod. You could define whatever you want. If you just want 2, if you want 10, it's up to you. You can define what those environments are. And your configuration, you can then specify for configuration overrides for those environments. So this is what's really important, is that I can have a single database connection, but each of my environments could have a different IP address or different credentials or whatever it might be for that, so that I can define those differences, but all within the same server, same configuration. So you can think of it as like project inheritance. You have the core configuration, and each environment can have overrides or additions, new changes in that environment that may not exist in others. So it allows you to define all that into one, and your one backup will have all the different environments. As you move that backup to from development to testing to production, each of those environments will pick the configuration based on the mode you want that server to be in. So you specify that mode through our configuration file. I want this to be production. It'll only pull the production config. So it makes that process very simple. You're not having to be selective about what you want to move when you're doing it, and there's a lot less mistakes. So it kind of looks like this, where you're defining that core configuration, and you can have those differences of those environments for all your config. Databases could have different IP addresses. Your PLCs can be separate drivers. It could be a simulator or an actual Modbus PLC or whatever in the production environment. It's going to be very, very easy to work with. Okay, so last 2 things to point out. Addition to all that, we're adding connectivity to a secrets tools or secrets vaults. And this is really important right now we define all the credentials inside of Ignition. So when we connect to a database, we put the username and password in there, and it's all encrypted in the internal database, but or in this version, it'll be encrypted in the files. But the problem is that if I make a backup and I send that backup to a vendor, I do have that encrypted password in that backup. And for a lot of IT departments, that's a no-go anymore. They don't want those to be out. They want the configuration Ignition to be sanitized to just be configuration for Ignition for their projects. So with secrets management, we can use a vault like HashiCorp Vault or others that store certificates and encryption keys, passwords, credentials, and we would integrate with those. So that way we can pull that into Ignition when we start up our systems, but we don't have to have it defined in our configuration. Now, we're not forcing people to do this. This is if you want to. You don't have to. We still do it the classic way, but we're going to make this process to migrate over. So working with IT to make it a super simple process on upgrades so you can take advantage of these tools that a lot of IT departments are starting to make standard. Last thing to point out is I mentioned containerization, Kubernetes. We're doing more around that. With our Docker container, we'll have environment variables for specifying initial configuration, make it really easy to use that Docker. We'll provide a lot of Docker Compose examples. For Kubernetes, we're going to provide Helm charts, which are going to make it very easy to deploy common architectures. So we can actually deploy an entire architecture with like 10 different servers in a matter of 30 seconds. Makes that really, really simple. And for any kind of platform that's out there, whether it's on-premise Kubernetes clusters or going to the cloud. So again, IT people are very excited about this because we're going to give them the best practices and these examples on how to do it. So beta is going to be out in December. We're on track for that. We're very excited about it. You can get access to all these amazing features. This is why the machine outside does not have 8.3. They don't have it yet. We're getting close to having that full installer. The release is going to be in February, most likely of 2025, and we're very excited about that. From a support standpoint, it'll be a LTS release, so just like 8.1 LTS. Means long-term support. So you can make a choice of when you want to upgrade, but it will be supported for that 5-year term, and there will be a 2-year overlap between 8.1 and 8.3. So plenty of time to be able to deal with that. Upgrading, if you have upgrade protection, the upgrade's free. The upgrade process is very simple. If you're on 8.1, it'll be a seamless upgrade automatically. If you're on 7.9, you will have to upgrade to 8.1 first and then to 8.3. So that is that little jump there, but that was because of some cybersecurity things we have to take care of, but it's still a very simple process, completely backwards compatible. You're not going to lose. There's not going to be breaking changes. That's there. We just do our normal upgrades that we are dealing with. So again, this afternoon, I'll do more on 8.3 for technical, but that's it. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Thank you.
Thanks, Travis. Just a question from the back around the tag historian. Would the power historian be included with the tag historian module, or would it be a separate new module?
It's included with the tag historian module. Now, going forward, we may make decisions on how we create modules. Doesn't mean it's how we're gonna license it. So it might very well, like you buy tag historian, which might be 2 or 3 modules. But we're not going to charge you for each of those, right? So we're trying to be detached a little bit from how we develop modularly to make it easier for us, but we don't necessarily have to sell it that way. And by the way, prices are not going to be increased with 8.3.
Fantastic. Travis, thank you very much.